Thranduil, son of Orofer, was a Sindarin elf and the king of the Sylvan elves of Mirkwood of the Woodland realm. He was the father of Legolas, the elven prince of Mirkwood, who was a member of the Fellowship of the Ring. His name comes from Telerin Sindarin dialect, meaning vigorous spring. Thranduil was born during the First Age, in Doriath, prior to the Second Kinslaying. In the Second Age, well before the building of Barad-dûr, many of the Sindar left Lindon and travelled eastward. Thranduil is first recorded in this event, when he and his father Orofer arrived with only a handful of Sindar in Greenwood the Great. Orofer was taken by the Sylvan elves as their lord and founded the Woodland realm. Thranduil, as the only son of Orofer, became the crown prince of the newly founded realm. In this realm both Sindarin and Sylvan Elvish were spoken, though not all members of the woodland folk spoke Sindarin. Thranduil followed his father and numerous lightly armed elves in the War of the Last Alliance. In the Battle of Dagorlat, Orofer rushed forward at the head of his most doughty warriors before Gil-galad had even given the signal for advance, and thus was slain during this first assault upon Mordor. Thranduil survived, but over the course of the war, two-thirds of his people had perished. After the siege of Barad-dûr, when Sauron was defeated, Thranduil led the remainder of his people back north to the Greenwood, where he was crowned king of the Woodland realm, reigning over the whole of Greenwood the Great. But there was in Thranduil's heart a still deeper shadow. He had seen the horror of Mordor, and could not forget it. If ever he looked south, its memory dimmed the light of the sun, and though he knew that it was now broken and deserted, and under the vigilance of the kings of men, fear spoke in his heart that it was not conquered forever. It would arise again. His feelings proved right as the Third Age progressed, and a sorcerer known as the Necromancer, later revealed to be Sauron returned, took over the abandoned elven fortress of Amon Lang and turned it into Dol Guldur. Under his foul influence, the Greenwood grew dark, becoming known as Mirkwood, and infested with orcs, giant spiders, and other spawn creatures. The wood elves of Mirkwood were reduced in number and retreated to lands in the north of Mirkwood. At this time, Thranduil's title was the King of the Elves of Northern Mirkwood. Thranduil, as a king, fostered relationship with neighboring peoples, trading mostly with the men of northern Rhovanion and also of Dorvinion via the lake town businessmen. When the dwarves settled in the Lonely Mountain, Thranduil was not overly excited, as he remembered the fate of his famous overlord Thingol, killed by the greedy dwarfs. But the trade with Erebor via Dale, because the wood elves did not trust the dwarfs, was opened and proved advantageous for all sides. When smog destroyed both Dale and the Dwarven Kingdom, the time of prosperity in the region ended. But the relations with Esgaroth still bloomed, and the deliveries of apples, butter, and Dorvinian wines, among others, did not cease coming up the Forest River. When Thorin the Second Oakenshield and his company entered northern Mirkwood, on their way to regain the Dwarven Kingdom of Erebor, they repeatedly tried to enter the clearings where the autumn feast for Thranduil and his folk was being held. But each time darkness would fall, and the interrupter fell into a deep sleep. In this manner was Thorin separated from his company and captured by Thranduil's elves. He provided no explanation regarding his person or his mission when interrogated, and Thranduil, in turn, sent him to the dungeon cave, not too gently, for he did not love dwarfs and thought he was an enemy. The rest of the party was captured shortly after and brought before Thranduil. When the party proved uncooperative with Thranduil's questioning, he accused them of wandering in his kingdom without leave, interrupting his feast, and stirring up trouble with spiders. They were sent to the dungeon as well, in separate cells and unaware of Thorin's whereabouts. Later, the prisoners successfully escaped, due to one member of the company, Hobbit Bilbo Baggins, who was able to avoid capture and help them out. After the dwarfs' escape, Thranduil received word of what had transpired from the raft elves who returned up the forest river. Thus he was now aware of the dwarfs' quest. Upon learning this, he stated, "No treasure will come back through Mirkwood without my having something to say in the matter." He believed the dwarfs were incapable of slaying the dragon. However, he soon heard from his own messengers, including the birds, that the dragon's smoke had been felt, and the lake town destroyed. When the dragon guarded it no more, and believing the dwarfs dead, Thranduil desired to take possession of the Lonely Mountain and its treasures. Soon he settled on the way at the head of his allied spearmen and bowmen, but he turned to the long lake and the ruins of the lake town when the messengers sent by Bard the dragon slayer told him about their need and despair. The elves provided the needy supplies, as well as helped with building shelters for the coming winter. Only when the lake people were taken care of, led Thranduil his host, joined by the able men of Lake Town, to the ruins of Dale in support of Bard the bowman's claim to a share of the treasure. They had found Thorin's dwarfs alive and barricaded inside the Lonely Mountain. The negotiations led nowhere, as Thorin refused to recognize any claim against the treasure, although Bard was a descendant of Lord Girion of Dale, and the treasure of that town had been added by smoke to the one in the Lonely Mountain. Thranduil refused to spill any blood over the hoard. Therefore he settled for a siege, with no assault or anything violent. He intended simply to let hunger change Thorin's mindset. But when the Iron-Hills dwarfs arrived, intending to break the siege and reinforce Thorin's company inside Erebor, the battle seemed to be unavoidable. The first arrows were already in flight when the army of orcs and wargs arrived from the north, intending to sweep aside all opposition and conquer the mountain as well as the lands around it. This threat united the so far quarreling sides, and all three races stood together against the Black Tide. Thranduil led the elven force in the battle later called of 5 armies. His army was positioned on the southern side of the mountain, and was the first to charge the orc vanguard. After the battle was won, Thorin died of his wounds. Thranduil took Orcrist, the ancient elven blade forged in Gondolin, which was previously taken from Thorin during his captivity in Mirkwood, and laid it upon Thorin's tomb. In the end was Dragon's treasure divided among many elves, dwarfs, and men, with Thranduil receiving the emeralds of Girion. On his way back home was Thranduil accompanied by Bilbo, Gandalf, and Beorn. But they would not stay in the woods, even when Thranduil asked them to. When Bilbo and Gandalf bade farewell, Bilbo gave Thranduil a necklace of silver and pearls. In return, the Elven King titled Bilbo the Elf Friend, and returned with his host to their halls. A few years later, Aragorn and Gandalf delivered Gollum as a prisoner to Thranduil, asking him to guard him for them. But Gollum escaped his elven guardians after a few months, helped by an orc raid from Dol Guldur. Thranduil sent his son Legolas to Rivendell at the head of an embassy to report Gollum's escape from Mirkwood. During the Council of Elrond held there, Legolas was selected as one of the 9 members of the Fellowship of the Ring. Another member of the company was a dwarf, Gimli, the son of Gloin of Thorin's company, who had previously been imprisoned by Thranduil. The gradually established and unprecedented friendship between the dwarf Gimli and Legolas later helped to reconcile Thranduil's people with the dwarfs. When Sauron's forces from Dol Guldur attacked Thranduil's realm in Mirkwood, the long battle under the trees occurred. Thranduil repulsed the attack in the end, and launched his own counter-attack south soon after. He joined forces with the elves of Lorien for a joint assault at Dol Guldur, which they successfully conquered. Thranduil came into an agreement with Celeborn that the southern part of Mirkwood would be counted as East Lorien. Thranduil took the northern region as far as the mountains of Mirkwood. The wide forest between Mirkwood and East Lorien was given to the Burnings and Woodmen. At this time, also, Thranduil renamed Mirkwood Erin Lasgallen, the Wood of the Green Leaves. After the fall of Sauron, Thranduil's realm flourished, well into the Fourth Age. He had remained in Middle-earth as the king of the Great Forest long after his son Legolas left its shores, but in the end he joined him in the Undying Lands.